Hello there, thanks for joining us. Today's guest made thousands of us cry with his last book. One Day is among the biggest-selling British novels of recent times. It sold more than 5 million copies. Since then, he wrote the film version with Anne Hathaway. He's adapted Tom Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles and Charles Dickens' Great Expectations for TV. His adaptation of Far from the Madding Crowd, starring Carey Mulligan, has just hit cinemas. And his next book, Us, has just been translated into French. Let's go meet David Nicholls. David, welcome back to the show. You were last here to talk about One Day in 2011. Has life changed a lot since then?
It's been busy. It's been busy. It took a while to kind of escape from underneath One Day. You know, I love that book, but it took 2 or 3 years to publicise it as it came out around the world, and since then it's been hectic. It's been a crazy couple of years.
And did you feel guilty because you kind of got this label as being the man who made a nation cry?
Yeah, no, I was okay with that. I mean, I always thought with that book, and with this book as well, the new one, I wanted it to have a big emotional reaction. I wanted it to see people laughing out loud and also perhaps crying as well. I don't want to be manipulative, but you do want to get a big response, I think.
And it was inspired by Tess of the D'Urbervilles and Barbara Streisand's The Way We Were.
A little bit, I suppose.
One Day. But since you've written that, you've adapted it for the screen. You adapted Tess of the D'Urbervilles and Charles Dickens' Great Expectations for TV.
Yeah.
Far from the Madding Crowd, starring Carey Mulligan, has just hit cinemas.
Yeah.
You wrote that.
Yes.
There seems to be a theme. Let's have a quick look. We'll talk about it in a second.
I'm not going to tell stories just to please you. You can be sure of that.
For when your time it is past and gone, you care no more for you.
Be happy, Pip. This will pass in time. I'll be out of your thoughts in a week.
Out of my thoughts. You're in every thought.
They call me past the strangest door, because I keep no company, I'll make no enemy.
So you were the writer of all of those. What's it like seeing them on the screen?
They looked okay, didn't they? I haven't seen Tess for a long time. I mean, it's Eddie Redmayne playing Angel Clare, looking incredibly young, and Gemma, I don't know what happened to those two. But Tess was really good fun, but it feels like a long time ago, nearly 7 years now.
Like love, passion, romance. There just seems to be a bit of a theme. Why are you attracted to these stories?
Well, those three are among my favourite novels. And, you know, Hardy is a great novelist and a great writer of nature, and you know, his prose style is beautiful and he's a wonderful poet, and I can't do any of those things. But again, you know, Hardy is full of big emotions, and there's a sense of fate, a sense of people who should be together but are rent apart by circumstances, and a kind of a sort of grandeur and romance that I really love. Great Expectations is a brilliant book about growing up, which is a theme I've written about, and about class and the journey from boyhood into manhood, which is something I've come back to a couple of times. So those books, even though they're masterpieces, and I could never write anything remotely like those novels, they've definitely influenced my own writing.
Well, lots of those themes you just mentioned are in your new book, Us. At the beginning, that was about an estranged father and son, but apparently you'd written something like 35,000 words, and you threw it all in the bin and started again.
I did. After One Day, I thought, I'm never going to write another love story. That's it. I'm going to write about fathers and sons. So I wrote this novel. It took about a year. It was agony, and I gave it to a couple of people, and they said, well, this is okay, but it's not as good as Us. See how you feel about throwing it away. And so I did, and I threw it away and I started again with a completely new set of characters, a completely new situation, a kind of love story.
So tell us what it is about.
Yeah, it's about a guy called Douglas Peterson who's woken by his wife after 25 years, and she tells him she's leaving. And their son is about to go off to college, and so suddenly Douglas is faced with this prospect of living the rest of his life alone. And he has one last chance to make amends, and that's a holiday, a grand tour around the great European cities and art galleries. And he decides that this holiday is going to be so perfect, it's going to be such a feast of art and culture and fun that his family will find a new bond and strength. And the story of this disastrous trip is intercut with 25 years of their relationship, the story of their family. So it's a portrait of a marriage. It's about art and science. And I suppose if one day was about will they or won't they get together, this one is about will they or won't they stay together.
It's also a focus, I mean, between the father and the son, and it's about parenthood.
Yeah.
I mean, you've previously dealt with the topic in the screenplay, and when did you last see your father? You're a father yourself.
Yeah.
How did you find your own experience with parenthood affecting your writing and your own experience with your own father?
Well, my children are very young, so I haven't hit this difficult adolescent time.
It looks terrifying, doesn't it?
It does look terrifying. But, you know, I was an adolescent myself, and that had its moments of conflict. And I think the hardest thing for me was while I was writing this book, my father became ill, and halfway through the book, at the point where it becomes much more about fathers and sons, my father died. And even though the book is not autobiographical, there's very little of me or my dad in there, inevitably that had an impact on the writing, because you write about what preoccupies you. So I think some of the kind of regrets and concerns I had at that time found their way onto the page in a sort of buried, disguised way, perhaps.
And Douglas is the sort of narrator in the book. He's 50-odd, he's a biochemist.
Yeah.
He never really was young, even when he was young.
Yes, he was born middle-aged.
He was
yes.
born middle-aged. I was always on his side, though,
Yeah.
in the book. I felt very fond of him, even though sometimes he did make me cringe a little
Yes,
bit.
yeah.
Is there part of you in him?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, it's true that I get, anxious. I'm a bit of a worrier, like Douglas. And I can be a little bit pedantic. I don't think I'm as controlling and cautious and conservative as he is. But, I worry a lot. I mean, I'm quite neurotic. I lose a lot of sleep about silly things, and that's something that Douglas has. But often you write, away from yourself. That thing, write what you know. I don't really believe in that. Sometimes you have to push yourself and write the opposite. So Douglas is a scientist, a very passionate scientist. I know nothing about that. At an earlier time in my life, it was something that interested me, but I kind of let it go for books and acting and theatre and film and all of those things.
And Russell Crowe apparently is interested in playing Douglas, according to media reports.
Sort of. All that happened is Russell read the novel and really responded to it and loved it and tweeted about it in a very passionate way. But we're a long way off thinking about what might happen next.
Would you like someone like him? Would you like someone a bit more ordinary?
I don't know. The biggest question for me is whether it could ever work as a film, because it's 25 years and 9 countries, and it's sort of epic and 2 hours.
You did it with one day.
I did, but the process of cutting that down was absolutely brutal.
Oh, okay.
and I'm not sure if I want to do that with this one. So I think if it does have a life, it may well be on television, because it just gives you a little more, and 4 or 5 hours is just more space, a bigger canvas.
Paris, it had a role in One Day. It
Yeah.
also plays quite a big role in Us.
Yes.
Because the character spends some time on their grand tour here in the city. Some observations I made about the city in the book are there's always water washing the streets.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
lots of drinking at lunchtime, and there are an abnormal amount of pharmacies.
There are. Everywhere you look, that green cross.
So these are all things you think yourself.
Nope, they're Douglas. They're Douglas. I mean, that's the thing to emphasise. It's quite nerve-wracking writing about. When you write about the English abroad and then you visit those cities and you have to defend the book, and you always have to point out that it's not your attitude, it's the characters. But it is a comedy about the English in Europe. That slight awkwardness we have, that slight sense of coming from an island. But it's a fun portrait. I think he just, Paris, like London, is a very aggressive city, and it's not somewhere that Douglas feels particularly relaxed.
He has very dodgy French in the book.
He does. He
What's
has
your
terrible
French like?
Certain disaster. I'm like Douglas. I suppose that is one overlap in that I'm kind of, I'm plucky. I try. But a lot of the words I use are completely made up. I mean, I don't know where I get them from.
In the book as well, they're sort of going to all the art galleries in the
Yes.
city.
Yeah.
And I know you come to Paris quite regularly with
Yeah.
with your books. Do you get a chance to go to the art galleries?
I do.
Do you find them as daunting as maybe he did?
I find the Louvre wonderful and exhausting. I mean, he talks in the book about how it's much, much more tiring than climbing a mountain, walking around the Louvre. It's completely exhausting. You see people sort of staggering from gallery to gallery. Douglas is the kind of person who feels like he ought to see it all, needs to see everything, and consequently it's not very relaxing. But I love art galleries. I feel a little like Douglas, as if I'm missing a part of my education. I'm never quite sure what I'm meant to be, how I'm meant to be responding, what I'm meant to be seeing on the canvas, whether I'm meant to have a kind of intellectual or an emotional response. So like Douglas, I feel a little excluded sometimes, but I really love visiting those galleries, and it's almost the first thing I do when I get to a city.
And just before we go, you wrote Far From the Madding Crowd that's just premiered in the UK with Kerry Mulligan this week.
Yes.
And what was that like?
It was great. You know, it's terrifying when you work on something for... I mean, I've been working on Madding Crowd for about 5 years now. You lose sight of what it is and how it's going to work. And this was the first time I saw it with an audience. And I was terrified, but it went down really, really well. I think that the most striking thing about it is how amazing the cast is, particularly Kerry as Bathsheba. She's so strong and vibrant and complicated and brave and maddening, and it's incredible to see a strong female lead like that. It's so rare, and to think that this book was written in 1872, and yet she feels so contemporary and vibrant and exciting. So I'm really proud and excited by it. The director, Thomas Vinterberg, is a great, great director. The cast are great. It looks beautiful. I'm very, whatever happens to it, I'm very proud of it.
Okay, well, I can't wait to see it. David, thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us again here on France 24. And we're going to play out with that. David Nicholls' Us has just been translated into French. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Let no man steal your time.
You've never seen yourself through a man's eyes. It's like not being able to think.
I want, very much, to protect you for the rest of your life.